Hello! Welcome to Lergle Stories. My name's Logan. It's nice to meet you. Today we're going to be reading a story by Nicholas Goodin, and it's called The Great Race of Kakadu. This book was published by Austin Macauley Publishers, and it's them that we have to thank for this book. I'll tell you a little bit about Nicholas. Nicholas Goodin was born in 2006, so that means he's only 14 right now. He began writing at the age of 9, after he was asked to write a short story for his extension class. He enjoys school and has several hobbies, which include playing the violin and soccer, programming robotic toys, drawing, taekwondo, and of course reading. He lives with his parents and sister Georgia in Western Australia, which is where this book is set. Let's begin. Elliot was an emu. He had big, floppy feathers, which always looked scruffy, and he had very, very, very long legs. He had a very long neck that was good for spying on animals which might eat him. He was as tall as your mummy and daddy. He had very small wings, so he couldn't fly, but he could run as fast as a car on his very, very, very long legs. Elliot lived in the Kakadu National Park and spent most days using his very long legs to race through the grass looking for food. He liked to eat crickets, cockroaches, and beetles, most of all, along with pebbles to help break them up in his tummy. Elliot was born in Kakadu, and his daddy sat on the egg and kept him warm until he hatched. Elliot's daddy looked after him until he was old enough to look after himself. Elliot loved living in the Kakadu National Park, and he loved being an emu. One of the reasons that he loved Kakadu was the great land and air race. He had always wanted to race, but was never allowed to. You see, Elliot was a bird that couldn't fly, so he couldn't enter the great air race. He wasn't allowed to enter the great land race either, as he was a bird and not an animal. Elliot remembered his daddy telling him that a platypus had won the great land race once, and he had thought, that's not very fair. Nobody knows what a platypus is. He thought and he thought and he thought. Is a platypus a bird or an animal or a fish? Elliot made a complaint. He said that if the platypus was allowed to run in the great land race, he should be allowed to run as well. The animals and birds had a big meeting. Douglas the dugite, Wobble the wombat, and Gilbert the goanna thought that Elliot should be allowed to run. But Clive the crocodile and Ted the Tasmanian devil said that Elliot was a bird, and if he wanted to race, he had to fly. They argued and argued and argued. Then Albert, the wise old owl, spoke. Let's vote, he said loudly. Put your paws and wings up if you think that Elliot should be allowed to race. Douglas had no wings or paws, but stuck his tail up high. Let him race, he hissed. It was agreed. Elliot could race. The day of the great land and air race came. Elliot watched as his bird friends flew through the sky. Millie the magpie had stolen the starter pistol, and they had to ask Albert the owl to say, "Ready, set, go." Cleo the kookaburra laughed all the way to the finish line. At last, it was Elliot's turn to run in the great land race. He was very scared as he stood at the starting line. There were many dingoes and eagles in the crowd, and Elliot remembered his daddy telling him not to walk too far away when he was small, in case the dingoes and eagles tried to eat him. Clive the crocodile snapped his huge teeth, and Ted, the naughty Tasmanian devil, tried to push him over. Then Elliot saw his mummy and daddy in the crowd cheering him on. He took a big breath. Then Albert screeched, "Ready, set, go!" And they were off and racing. Douglas the Dugite was already in the lead, followed by Kenneth the kangaroo, Bob the bandicoot, and Gilbert the goanna. Wobble the wombat was still at the starting line, sleeping. Elliot stretched his long, long legs and ran as fast as he could. He ran past Bob and Gilbert and heard his friends cheer as he raced towards the finish line. He and Douglas were neck and neck. Elliot saw his mummy in the crowd. She was crying because she was so happy. Elliot stretched out his long, long neck and beat Douglas to the finish line by a beak. He had won. Sometimes it's great to be a bird. The end. I think I love emus even more than I used to now. The author, Nicholas Goodin, has put a few facts at the end of the book about emus. I'm going to read them to you. The amazing emu. There are about 1 million wild emus living just in Australia. Emus are very good swimmers. Emu chicks can eat by themselves as soon as they hatch from their eggs, straight away. Emus have lots of short naps during the night. That's lovely. Girl emus are bigger than boy emus. Very cool. So I hope you enjoyed our story today. What's your favourite animal? Do you think it would do well in a great land race, or a great air race, or even a great water race? Ask your mummy or daddy, or any grown-up, to click subscribe to Lergle Stories so that you don't miss a single video. See you next time.